Almost everything in the world has a form. A chair, a garden hose, a souffle. Many forms match people's expectations about what they should look like or do. To be a chair, an object should have a flat surface and some means of support. Now, other forms have much greater flexibility, particularly if their structure is conceptual rather than material. Money is a good example. It is defined as any accepted medium of exchange which enables a society to trade goods without the need for barter, according to the Oxford English Dictionary. Often it is a coin or a bill, but across human history, money has also been shells, beads, giant circular stone sculptures, and increasingly, binary code, swapped by computers. It's possible to argue that money doesn't exist at all, because really, it's just a concept. So money is a highly flexible form, and it can be modified to fit the desires and needs of any society. Now, essays, too, are highly flexible forms, and the best ones find their own structures. Unified by a storyteller who speaks from personal experience in the first person, essays spin themselves along, seeking the next turn or leap of idea as they go. Essays explore, essays imagine, essays digress. Their structures don't have to have fixed rules. They might move lockstep, like soldiers marching in formation, or they can circle back on themselves, like tightly coiled spirals. Or they may branch out in all directions, like capillaries or the streets of Paris. It all depends on the needs of the writing. Now, ideally, the form of an essay should fit the function of the writer's main point, as perfectly as a glove warms the hand or a bowl holds soup. And this freedom to go wherever thinking and reflection takes the author is one of the most exciting things about writing essays. Most literary genres have pretty strict rules about structure. For instance, we all learned in high school English class that a traditional short story begins with that initiating circumstance followed by the rising action and a climax and then ending with a denouement. Or take a sonnet. Ever since Shakespeare adapted the form from the Italians, it's had 14 lines, a strict end rhyme scheme, and that infamous rhythm of iambic pentameter. A one-act play has conventions too. It includes lines of dialogue, a monologue or two, and stage directions to control the character's actions. In other words, as soon as you hear short story or sonnet or one-act play, you have certain notions about what you're about to read or to see. Now, it's true that essays assigned in school often come with organizational conventions as well. Students are taught the 5-paragraph persuasive essay, the comparison-contrast essay, the descriptive essay, the narrative essay, and so on. Yet these are essays of convenience, not creativity. The convenience releases students from having to worry about developing their own forms, and as a result, it allows them to focus on elements of argumentation, description, and narration. So, educational essays, or what rhetoricians call modes of discourse, are a first step toward developing analytical skills that can later enable more practiced writers to discover the most appropriate framework for whatever essay they might want to write. Let me give you an analogy of what I mean. Almost all houses in the Western world are built from the same materials: concrete, wood, steel, brick, plaster. These materials are a bit like the skills most students adopt when writing school essays on how to fashion an argument, how to shape a narrative, how to describe an object or a person, or how to compare and contrast two ideas. Yet, the overall design of any house that ultimately holds these materials together changes depending upon the desires of the architect. Houses come in all shapes and sizes and are adapted to all manner of terrain. They are square, triangular, and round. They are 1 and 16 stories high. There are those that are as wide open as a field and those that are as close as a maze. And of course, there are houses that are dug underground, suspended in trees, or built into the side of a hill. Like writers, then, architects are artists. They take the basic tools of their trade and construct wonders. So the dwelling that is your essay will serve the dweller's needs. That means its design will match your needs, given what you hope to say. And it's this adaptability of essays that makes building them so endlessly thrilling and endlessly fascinating. So once you know what you want to write about and have had a chance to practice some of the more mature strategies or skills that help in constructing well-designed essays, then your task is to shape your ideas into a coherent and cohesive whole. You must transform your thoughts into a structure that best fits the intention of your primary points. Okay, you might find yourself daunted or perplexed about how to discover and develop the right arrangement for your essays. And it's true that the numerous forms that constitute an essay speak to the genre's seemingly endless mutability. For there are memoir essays and lyrical ones, epistolary and portrait and public intellectual essays, polemical and historical and travel pieces, as well as essays on food and humor and nature. For now, though, let's look more closely at two intriguing short forms, the microessay and the proem, meaning an essay that brings together elements of both poetry and prose. If we look in depth at these two kinds of short essays, I'm confident it will help you to see what I mean about selecting the best form to fit the function of your writing. In the late 1990s, an award-winning essayist named Dinty Moore started an online journal called Brevity. Moore saw his journal as an experiment in producing excellent essays that were only 750 words or less. This form is now called flash nonfiction or microessays. In the years since Moore launched Brevity, microessays have become all the rage, much like in other times and places, the 6-word short story or the haiku. Many admired essayists have tried their hand at this short form, from Lee Martin to Barbara Hurd to Sherman Alexie. Dinty Moore believes that microessays are in keeping with other distilled art forms, such as 2-minute dance solos or brief experimental films. He's written that there's a through line of emotion, beauty, and discomfort that can fit into the tiniest of frames. When Moore was asked what qualities define the best microessays, he said, tight, crisp language, an immediate and a consistent voice, and a carefully shaped structure. So here's an example of a microessay by one of my own writing students named Jessica Edwards Smith. As I share it with you, pay attention to Jessica's tight, crisp language. Note also how she shapes an immediate and a consistent voice, and see if you can pick up on her carefully shaped structure, which consists of 3 distinct parts. The title of Jess's microessay is Split. She thinks through worst-case scenarios with her best fake smile, and I watch her converse with a lover, like the lover is mine. I know she's not being honest when she tells him, "Oh yeah, babe, everything's great," because even though I don't really know her anymore, I know the lie in the 1.5-second space between expression and reaction. I am her consciousness. She sees me up here on the ceiling. I smile back. She doesn't. She doesn't know what time it is anymore. Hunger pains or second hands she ignores. The only numbers she seems to remember are statistics. Late at night, and I watch her Google how many college girls have depression. It's 45%. She must think that knowing statistics will keep her from becoming one. I hold the hurt she no longer feels. I tell her to eat or to go outside or to write something pretty or at least to write something. But she never listens to me. She just lies on the floor in a blue bubble of laptop light. She believes I took her soul, but then again, She doesn't like that word empty. She blames me for being smart, hopeful, organized, full, and well-rested. She thinks that because I am all of those things, she can't be. But when she had a soul, she was talent, wit, beauty, and ambition. I remind her that I'm keeping safe these things that once filled her. But when I say that they're up here with me, she gets angry or quiet. She says she can't reach. I do not remember forgetting myself. I never used to look up and see a girl floating above me out of reach, holding everything I once was and wanted. She looks like me and she smiles like me. And sometimes I can even trick myself into smiling like that, watching my mouth open and close in the fluorescent bathroom mirror, repeating, "It's all good, it's all good, it's all good." I can't tell you when the split happened. It's like rain. You never see the first drop, but after a while, you're caught in a downpour, and you don't remember when you started missing the sun. But at least in storms, you can't see the light you're missing. She's quick to give me memories, bursts of light. "Here, see this day when you brought home your puppy? Look at that front page article you published. Why aren't you proud?" She's annoying, giving me advice and telling me things I already know. The more I ignore her, the louder she gets. She wants me to do well. She believes I can, as if finding normalcy is as easy as brushing my teeth. "Hey, it's warm out today. Let's go on a hike," she says. "Hey, it's lunchtime. There's a sandwich in the fridge," she says. "Hey, you really can't afford not to get a job this summer. Do you want to get stuck waitressing at that seafood place again?" The girl on the ceiling is happy and attractive and good at all the things I was once good at. I watch her drift around up there, stringing beads into necklaces, reciting romantic poetry. I watch her giggle and pour steaming tea into a luminescent cup, asking me if I want 1 spoonful of sugar or 2. She knows I won't answer. I never do. But she asks anyway because courtesy is something else I lost in the split. I follow her into her car, and the ceiling is much closer. I'm just above her head now. These are moments when we feel almost connected. She is still warm with life. She listens when I tell her I wish I could give her back what she thinks I stole. But as much as I want to be let back in, I can't be without her permission. And I don't think she knows how to give it to me. She starts the engine, drives over the big bridge, heading back home from school. Her stereo is turned all the way up, and I float into the speakers, into the music, into her ears. She sings every word of the song she finds me in, and that's invitation enough. She turns up the music and smiles. And so for a song or two, for a drive, we are again one. Now, one thing that's compelling about this brief essay is that while Jess had to sustain a compelling first-person voice, at the same time, she also had to figure out how to split this voice into 2. I think Jess is successful because her 2 voices are indeed consistent, even though one is optimistic and one is depressed. Both voices speak in straightforward sentences, often starting with a simple subject-verb construction. She sings, she turns, she looks, she believes she is. A structure that underscores the candid and direct nature of this narrator. Also, both voices use precise and vivid imagery, such as when the optimistic girl of the past notes how her current self sits in a blue bubble of laptop light. Or another example is when the depressed girl of the present moment watches her ceiling self pour steaming tea into a luminescent cup. So even as Jess's 2 selves are clearly opposed, they also speak as one in terms of their syntax and style. And that's a smart decision. It's particularly smart since at the end of the micro-essay, Jess shows that these 2 versions of the same girl come together for the length of a drive and a few songs. Even more importantly, though, because Jess is interested in conveying how the same person with the same voice might be split in 2 between a dynamic girl of memory and a depressed girl of the now, Jess chooses a form that underscores this rupture. She begins and ends her essay with the remembered girl, the ghost girl, while keeping her present tense self inside the essay's center. As a result, Jess's form directly follows her function. The girl's core self, the one that's actually alive, is sandwiched between two sections that show the narrator as she used to be. And there's a sharp irony, too, in using this form. The depressed girl feels empty, although she claims not to like that word. And so the center of this essay represents the depressed girl's psychological emptiness. So the microessay center, the place where the girl's self actually resides, is paradoxically drained of motivation, emotion, movement, and life. It's a starved place. And as Jess herself explains, it's a center without a soul. Now, by bookending her essay with observations from this ghost girl, this girl of the past actually merges with a potential girl, one who's still coming into focus. For while the ghost girl is holding on to the talent, wit, beauty, and ambition of the real girl's previous life before her depression, in the final section, the ghost girl suggests that there will be a better future. This ghost girl says she is still warm with life, and she sings every word of the song she finds me in. So these two figures drive back home over that big bridge, and they merge into one, into music and smiles. Once again, then, form fits function. Okay, so a microessay such as Split clearly demonstrates a carefully shaped structure. Yet another intriguing short form of the essay is the proem, one, as I said before, that combines aspects of both poetry and prose. In the 15th century, a proem meant a preface or a preamble. Literally from the Latin, it meant before song. The most well-known modern example of this traditional form of a proem is probably Hart Crane's piece called Proem to Brooklyn Bridge, which introduces his longer work that's entitled The Bridge. Yet the term proem has evolved over the centuries to mean a blending of prose-like qualities within a poetic structure, or a prose poem. Now, since prose poems are such a recent form, definitions are hard to find. Yet we can say that contemporary proems use the extended rhythm, syntax, punctuation, characters, and lines of dialogue that characterize short stories, novels, memoirs, and essays. They also have scene-like or situational qualities. They focus on the sounds of language. They use sharp imagery. And they have a block-like form on the page, like a thick paragraph. One proem that is often reproduced in anthologies of poetry and essays is Carolyn Forché's The Colonel, about the author's experience in the late 1970s with a colonel in El Salvador who emptied a sack of human ears in front of her. This occurred after they'd shared a tense dinner. While the colonel shook the human ears onto a table and then swept them to the floor, he told Forché and a friend of hers that they were in no position to expect legal or human rights. It's a harsh, scary description, one that domesticates torture, making the suffering of all those people who lost their ears palpable and close. The Colonel is poetic in its sense-based descriptive detail. Forché describes the Colonel's house-turned fortress with glass shards embedded in the walls around the exterior to scoop the kneecaps of anyone trying to climb over them. She also employs dark imagery, such as the moon she sees out the Colonel's window that swings bare on its black cord like a hanged prisoner, or the ears themselves scattered on the floor like dried peach halves. Yet what keeps this piece essayistic, and not just poetic, is how Forché takes on the confessionality of creative nonfiction with its first-person storyteller. From the moment she declares that she was there, that she saw it all, I was in his house, Forché makes it clear that she wants to witness and reveal this horrific event to her readers. And this is the voice of the essayist. Forché presents her proem as a single block of text made up of simple, short, and severe sentences. These sentences combine exposition, her own interior monologue, and direct dialogue that she quotes from the Colonel. In this way, Prose presents a carefully reconstructed scene that tells a brief narrative, one with a clear beginning, middle, and end. Okay, so let me give you another example of a proem, this one in its entirety. Another of my students is a young man named Matt Alexander, who served as a U.S. Marine in Afghanistan. As with Prose's poem about the Colonel, Matt's piece brings together the narrative qualities of prose with the rhythm, sounds, descriptions, and imagery of poetry. Matt's poem is called Same Drab Walls. 12 years after public school, memories fade and new ones emerge. Ones to remember and ones to forget. Ones violent and past, and ones still in the present tense. My first taste of freedom, away from my family, away from my friends, was a drab white room, no pictures allowed. The sounds all around me were of drunken men walking the hallways, yelling, laughing, crying. Funny how a single weekend can show the whole range of human emotions in a 4-story brick building made from the blankness of warfare. Sometimes we would talk about our friends back home. Sometimes we would talk about our families, but there was one constant that never changed. We talked about our brothers. The way we lost them in country, the way we lose them at home. Strange how the most dangerous place for a Marine can be his own backyard. When those same drab walls began to close in and the hum in my ears got louder and louder, all I could hear was the echoing sounds of combat. My new roommate heard nothing but silence or the video game he was playing. He wasn't in the GAN with us, so I shunned him. We all shunned him. He didn't belong. Weird how, after coming home, I started to feel that I didn't belong. Now, though, in the room I live in, pictures are allowed, and no sergeant is telling me what to do. No field day every night, no 4 a.m. wake-up, no drunken men crying in the corridors. Crazy how, in the blink of an eye, it was a rifle, and now it's a novel. Now there's a door that locks and my own bed, a place to think, read, and write, where the shadows from the past can't always reach me and where peace has started to set in. That quiet sound of peace, no hum at all, just the occasional foghorn. Cool how that foghorn is an announcement for a party and not something else. The room still smells like the barracks, still looks like the barracks, and it still has the sound of men, but only sometimes drunk and never crying. Now there is laughter and students cheering for the home team. Strange how the differences are easy. It's the similarities that are hard. So Benny didn't make it here with me like we'd planned. That's a bummer. His life remains back there in a world I've almost forgotten. In the shadows of my new room, within these new drab walls, I can still see you, Benny. So I guess I'm not alone here, like I thought I would be. And there's a picture on the wall, the one we took on our first deployment with Conjure. That picture is my motivation. I wake up with it and fall asleep to it, flashing a small light towards it when I roll over from a dream in the dark. And it's worth every bit, Benny, your life and Conjure's legs. It's well worth it all for what we have now, an education and a future. Strange how you're both here and there with me in those memories. Strange how time passes and also stops. The form Matt has chosen is distinctly different from that of a microessay, but it's a form that best fits his intent. With this proem, Matt creates a stream of consciousness in which everything he's remembering and everything he's experiencing is held within a single block of text. This block of text contains the past and the present, military and college life, Afghanistan and the United States, the dead and the living. It's the compactness of the form that brings to the fore the crowded, claustrophobic emotions that Matt is both expressing and withholding. And note how Matt's essay is shaped by a poet's ear, more than a storyteller's sense of plot or sequence. With his repetition of "strange how," he creates a refrain, one that emphasizes and echoes the strange vacillation he feels between the life he now leads and the one he's just left back in Afghanistan. To stress even more how his perspective moves back and forth between then and now, Matt also uses parallel constructions in his sentences. For instance, Matt says, "He didn't belong," and then, "I didn't belong." He talks of men crying in the hallways and men never crying in the hallways. He tells us that his memories are ones to remember and ones to forget, and that for him time passes, but also stops. With these parallel constructions, Matt is able to draw on the power of a poet to link sound to sense. But even beyond these techniques that Matt uses to create rhythm and include a refrain, his proem also engages the reader's senses. We are asked to see those blank walls, and then the ones that aren't blank. We see the rifle and then his novel. We hear the echoes of combat against the foghorn that announces a party. And we smell the sweat and heat emanating from the barracks, as well as from his dorm room. By engaging the reader's senses with the proem, asking a reader to re-see and rehear and re-feel these memories and experiences, when Matt turns to address Benny at the end, the reader feels the loss of Benny all the more. This turn to Benny also signals a change in the proem's perspective, especially when Matt stops using the we that dominates most of his piece and takes on the first-person I. He does this at the end to talk directly to Benny, who Matt calls you. In classical rhetoric, to speak to someone who isn't present in a piece of writing is to use apostrophe, meaning a figure of speech in which the narrator breaks away from talking to the audience in order to talk with a third party who is absent or who cannot be seen, such as God or a muse or, in this case, a dead friend. So when Matt says, "In the shadows of my new room within these new drab walls, I can still see you, Benny," he's using apostrophe to speak to his lost friend and fellow soldier. The effect of this is profound. The proem becomes very intimate. When Matt writes, "And it's worth every bit, Benny, your life in Conjur's legs. It's well worth it all for what we have now, an education and a future," we feel as if we're overhearing a private conversation, as if we're listening to something that's really none of our business. The moment is raw, both wretched and hopeful. It's how Matt takes the stream of consciousness of his proem and makes it less about his own struggles and more about the inevitable losses of war. Okay, now that we've talked about these intriguing short forms of the essay, microessays and proems, I think it's worth asking whether Jess and Matt knew that they needed these forms to write the essays that they intended to write. When Jess sat down to write Split, did she know she needed to adopt the form of a microessay? And when Matt got the idea for writing Same Drab Walls, was he already planning on writing a proem? The answer is no. Neither Jess nor Matt decided upon the form of their essay before they started writing. Both of them had a beginning sense of what they hoped to say in their essays, even before they sat down and started. But their first drafts meandered, they went off on tangents, and their drafts changed as they went along. But after revision and more revision, both Jess and Matt found the forms their respective essays were best suited for. The award-winning essayist Annie Dillard says in her book called The Writing Life, "When you write, you lay out a line of words. The line of words is a miner's pick, a woodcarver's gouge, a surgeon's probe. You wield it, and it digs a path you follow. Soon you find yourself deep in new territory. Is it a dead end, or have you located the real subject? You will know tomorrow, or this time next year." So my advice is this: lay out your line of words and wield your pick or your probe. If you pay attention, your essay's shape will form under your fingers. It will be protean and messy at first, but eventually your essay will be an object that an anthropologist pulls out of the dirt. It will be a sculpture that an artist carves out of wood or stone. Eventually, your essay will find the form it's meant to follow.